3 whistles rang out, and I knew what that meant. I was 19 years old. I was a lifeguard at Jones Beach, and 3 whistles on the beach meant someone was missing. I ran down to the main stand, and the captain of our field shouted the order. They lost someone at field 3. It's a search and rescue. Go. 10 of us ran down the field to join the search team. There was already a crowd formed, and people were pointing to where they last saw the missing swimmer. We dove into the ocean, and we swam out past the breakers, and we formed a straight line perpendicular to the shore. We started our search pattern. We dove down about 10 feet into the dark, cold Atlantic Ocean. We swam into the current, and we came straight up for air. And when everyone's head popped up, we repeated that process again and again and again. We were exhausted, but we didn't come in. After more than an hour, I heard that whistle again. It was a terrible feeling. We weren't done. We hadn't found him. We got out of the water, and the captain of our field led us in a moment of silence. And when we opened our eyes, he looked at each of us and he said, "No one goes down in our water. At this field, no one goes down on our watch." And then he said something that I will never forget. "You either make the save or you die trying." Just a little intense, huh? We had to get back up in the stand that day. We had to do our job that day. And our captain said, in order to do that, we need to learn something. We need to make some changes. And we needed to watch each other's backs. We had to take care of ourselves. We had to take care of those around us. That was our definition of resilience on the beach. What's your definition? Right now, how do you define resilience? I want to use the Q&A as a place for us to answer some of these questions together. We're going to spend a lot of time cultivating answers to important questions today that are facing all of us as business people, as entrepreneurs. I was a lawyer for 18 years. Don't hold that against me. In fact, I should probably say I am an equitable customer. I've been an equitable customer since the first policy of insurance that I purchased in my early 20s, when at that point I was a school teacher. I went back to school, got a law degree, became a lawyer, and practiced that profession for 18 years. I've been a CEO of companies ranging from startup, bootstrap, to $100 million since then. And so resilience right now is something that's very, very much on the tongues of people. People are talking about it. People are acknowledging its importance. And yet it's something that we all define differently. So go ahead in the Q&A as we discuss this, go ahead and just share with me what some of those definitions are for you. What do you feel about resilience? What are your answers? Let's go ahead and take a look at some of those. And Nina, if you've got them there, let me just see if there's some answers.
I'm not seeing any yet.
Not seeing any yet. Okay. So go ahead and put your answers into that space. How do you define resilience for yourself, for your families, for your teams? What does it look like for you right now? I wrote a book called Pivot. It was a big bestseller, and I've spoken all over the world on the topic of pivoting. And for me, I'm sort of a serial pivoter. There's a part of me that has recognized that resilience in many ways is how you're able to pivot in the face of unexpected challenges like COVID-19 or other disruptions. And by the way, many of us were caught off guard by COVID. It's a disruption that we haven't seen in some time. And yet we remember what it was like after 2008 or in the midst of the financial crisis of 2008. Before that, we remember what it was like. I'm a native New Yorker. I raised, my wife and I were married 30 plus years. We have 4 wonderful kids, and my law practice was in Manhattan, but I also had an office in New Jersey, which is where we ended up at some point moving. And I was I was living in that area, and many of you remember what it was like on 9/11 and afterward. I remember that day. I remember exactly where we were. I remember the friends, and think about the friends we lost that day. That was a disruption that we didn't, any of us, count on, expect. There's always going to be some manner of disruption. Before that, in the early 90s, it was the financial crisis then. It was the real estate market debacle of the late 80s. It was the Y2K crisis of 2000. There's always going to be disruption. That is the one common denominator that we can count on. In fact, it's kind of an it's kind of a paradox, I suppose, that change is the only great constant. So how do you define resilience for yourself? McKinsey studied resilient organizations. In fact, they studied resilient organizations that came out of the 2008 financial collapse. And what they found was that resilience were the ones to recover the fastest. Resilience versus non or less resilient organizations recovered faster. And not only did they recover faster, but they also they widened a gap between themselves and their competition. Resilience is very important to an organization. It helps organizations to think more agilely, to be more flexible. It reduces turnover. We know how important it is to not only, as Tom was saying, build our organizations, find the right people, the best people, the cultural fits, but it's just as important to keep them, to encourage them, to engage them. And resilient organizations do all of those things. Resilient organizations are more able to solve problems quickly, are able to, quote, think outside of the box. They're able to innovate and improvise, figure things out. That's what resilience looks like today in the market. And I like to say that you've got to create resilience before you need it. I want to repeat that because it's so important. People think, now is the time when resilience is being called out of us because so many things have been disrupted. There's so much uncertainty about the future, politically, socially, economically. There's all this uncertainty. And now is the time to be building resilience, not just for the storm that we're dealing with at the moment, but for the next storm. Because that's the nature of life. It's the nature of business. I mean, look, if you've been in business for more than a minute, you know that this is true. There's always something unexpected around the corner. And business on the best of days is difficult. To own a business, to operate a business, to be an entrepreneur is difficult on a great day. And when you throw other things into the mix, it can take us out. And I don't mean permanently take us out, because we're going to talk about your resilience results, your results that we've got, the data sets that we created from the assessment that you filled out. What I'm talking about is being taken out for a day, for an hour. Because in the market that we're in, a day, an hour, a week of being sort of dizzy and confused and not able to know which way is next will cost you opportunities, cost you money. It'll cost you clients, cost you employees. It'll cost you your health. So we've got to do a better job of taking care of our businesses and ourselves. So there's three things that I want to focus on today. These three traits, I'm back in Jersey now. These three skills are the most important skills to build resilience now before you need it. Because it's resilience. Resilient teams are the teams that change the world. Resilience is made up of reframing. We've studied this in thousands of people, thousands of case studies, hundreds of organizations, Fortune 50 companies to startups. We found that the trait of a resilient person and a resilient organization starts with the ability to pause. When we think about reframing something, something's happened that we don't like. Something's happened that's unexpected. Something's happened that's threatened our business in some way. We all understand what that looks like today, right? We've all had that moment. But somewhere between last March and today, we've all had that moment. And often in those moments, people freak out. They don't know what to do. Or they go to judgment that this is bad, that this is wrong, that this is unfair. When all that you have to do in that moment, and the best thing you can do in that moment, is to pause. The first step in a reframe is to simply pause. That's like shifting your car into neutral, by the way. All it means is that we're not judging something. We're taking the right or the wrong out of it. We're taking the fair or the unfair, the good or the bad out of it, so that we can then do the next step. And the next step is that we ask. We pause to get to neutral, in other words, in order for us to then ask better questions about the situation. You know, my grandmother used to say that there are little gems in life, that little gems are like the hidden meanings in things. And I'm reminded of Viktor Frankl. I don't know how many of you know or remember who Viktor Frankl is. And you can go ahead, if you know that, go ahead and put that in the Q&A. If you remember Viktor Frankl's famous book, I'll quickly tell you a little bit about him, and then we'll get to the title of the book. But he's famous. He's famous for a particular thing called meaning therapy. Where did he develop this meaning therapy that ultimately became the subject of his book? He developed it when he was a concentration camp occupant. He survived a death camp in World War II. And when he was in this most unbearable of situations, you couldn't imagine yourself or anybody else in a situation like that. He was already thinking about how someday he'd be able to share what he learned in that moment, that he'd be able to share information that would help other people in their lives while he was going through it. If you could imagine that, he was asking for the meaning, to be guided, to see the meaning in something that seems so senseless. And then he wrote a book called, Nina, are there any answers in the Q&A? Just let me know if there are, but I'm going to say the title right now. Man's Search for Meaning. Man's Search for Meaning. I highly recommend this book because, again, it's so important that we find meaning in things. And the way that we find meaning is by asking questions, asking better questions. When you ask a better question, you always get a better answer. A better answer is always coming. I just don't know when it comes. I know that the cause and effect relationship between asking and receiving, between questions and answers, is evident. It's scientific. We just don't always know the timing of it. So first, you have to pause to reframe. Second, you have to ask to reframe. And lastly, you have to choose. We all know that our lives are a product of the choices that we've made. The quality of our lives is equal to the quality of the choices that we've made thus far. Wouldn't you agree? I wish I could see everybody to nod your head. Yes. So how is it that you make better choices? You follow this pattern. You pause, you ask, and then you choose. Now, one of the things that I get to choose, because I'm reminded of it all the time from my wife, because she constantly asks me this question. And this is a fundamental choice question. What is the creative opportunity? You think about everything that's happening in our world right now, everything that's happening in so many arenas that's causing stress and anxiety in a lot of people. And you're not alone if you're feeling that way. The question is not whether it's happening or what it means. It's what's the opportunity that's present. Once you've assessed that there will be opportunity, the next question is, what is it? Where is it? How do I seize it? And that's the point, that ultimately resilience is about finding those creative opportunities and then pivoting in that moment when other people are frozen or in fear or reactive even. Now, we know that we have plans. Everybody's life starts out with everybody's business starts out with a plan. And yet, for me, I don't know about you, but that second cartoon is really the reality of what I've seen in so many people for so many years in my own life, first and foremost, that we've got to be able to look at those plans realistically and know that we're going to ultimately be pivoting. So the second most important thing when it comes to developing resilience after reframing is to reset. To reset is built of two things. One is the first, and we all know what it's like, that when we make mistakes, right? When we make mistakes from the time that we're little kids, we realize that there are consequences for mistakes. when you're in kindergarten and second grade. I remember for me, often I would raise my hand and I would ask a question, and it wasn't a great question, or the question itself showed that I didn't really know much. And I remember my teacher sometimes kind of giving me that look, and kids even jeering or laughing. So I stopped asking those questions. I stopped putting myself out there in school. I wasn't a great student, and I caught up later on, but man, was I turned off to school at the beginning, because it always felt like there was punishment. If I didn't get good grades, or if I didn't have the right answers, or if I made outright mistakes, there was that red circle. Everybody remembers that from your papers, and maybe some of you all got A's all the time. I don't know. Maybe it was only green pen for you guys. For me, I got red pen, and it was brutal. But when I'm in the car to this day, and I think some of you might be able to identify with this analogy, you're in the car, you make a mistake, and you've got your GPS on. What does your GPS say to you? I know what mine is programmed to say. As soon as I make a mistake driving, my GPS goes, "You idiot." It's just like your third grade teacher told you. You never follow directions. Is that what your GPS says to you? Normally, it just says what? Redirecting or recalculating. And so we've got to recognize that as a part of our reset in times of disruption, we've got to recalculate. That's what it requires, recalculating and recalibrating. This is a different idea. This is about the concept of little, what it requires to make a small change in direction. Because often the biggest issue for businesses, and I sort of heard Tom alluding to this, because when I was listening to Tom, one of the things that I got out of Tom's talk was how important it is that you're on a growth path, that you put yourself on a growth path, that you're looking for education, you're looking for support, and support in the group, and support from people that have been there and done that already. When most people that are stuck in that situation, when they're earning a certain amount of money, maybe they haven't been able to break through that 200,000 barrier, or that 300,000, or I remember early on in my legal career, I couldn't break the 500 mark. I could get into the fours, but I could never seem to break that 500 mark. And when it came time to think about what it would take, maybe I needed to get on other attorneys involved. Maybe I needed to bring in a bigger staff. Maybe I needed to invest in technology, like the migration of something from one system to another, or create a system, and those things cost money, and they cost time, they cost resources. But the status quo is what sometimes we opt for. And a lot of people, when I work with folks, when I'm either working with an organization or coaching an executive, I'm always looking for the sort of the place that they are married to the status quo, that they're holding on to the status quo, meaning the devil that they know versus the devil that's unknown to them. And so the most important thing that any of us can do to be able to seize opportunities, to recalibrate in the moments of disruption, is to make a small change. Now, this is science. This is not motivation. I have no intention of motivating you, maybe inspire you, I guess. But this is science. This is physics, that you cannot change the input in any system and not see a corresponding change in the output, sometimes called the law of small differences or the butterfly effect. But you cannot change anything in a system and not see there be other changes that take place. So over time, again, I don't know the time that it requires for transformation to occur, but any change in direction, to me, in the face of the status quo, is transformational. Your organization will transform. You, as a leader in that organization, will transform the moment that you are no longer married to, committed to the status quo. Because the status quo is just another word for safety. It's a word for playing on defense. I heard Tom talking about the Yankees, and I'm a Yankees fan. I'm a little depressed right now that they didn't make it to the World Series. And people who don't like the Yankees are like, yeah, terrific, way to go. But I remember in a different arena, I'm also a Giants fan. I was a season ticket holder. We lived in Jersey. I used to go up to the Meadowlands. And it was so frustrating sometimes to see the Giants play, because we knew that in the third quarter sometimes, because of the way they were being coached and just the mindset of that team, that they would go into something that we used to refer to as the prevent offense. You guys, anybody out there Giants fans, or maybe you used to say that about the Jets? or some other team from some other place. We currently live in San Diego. We're in our home in Martha's Vineyard since COVID started back in May. So I'm on the East Coast with many of you guys, but we live the rest of the year in California. So every team's got its thing, but playing on defense is a death knell to an organization. It's a death knell to a team, to their ability, to a team's ability to win. We can't play the game on defense. We have to be changing things. We have to be disrupting before the market is disrupting us. How ironic is that? So yes, sometimes we talk about self-disruption. Sometimes we talk about positive interruption. A little bit of a reframe on that. So again, when it comes to resetting, you've got to recalculate and recalibrate. That's what resilient teams and resilient individuals do. Now, when it comes to resetting, I actually gave a TED Talk 2 years ago on a 10-second reset, my own personal 10-second reset. Because what I didn't share with you back in the day when I was practicing law actively was I used to wake up in the morning and I would put my feet on the floor at the beginning of the day. And I don't know how many of you can identify with this feeling, but I would start the day feeling anxious. I was agitated. The moment the alarm rang and I had to swing my legs over and put them on the floor and start the new day, I would feel this anxiousness, this agitation, and even, if I'm being honest, a bit of dread. And that's how I started my day. And it was debilitating in many ways. And I think right now, a lot of us are experiencing high levels. I know. Our research is clear. The research I've read is clear. People are more anxious. Anxiety is running rampant. Even depression. Lots of things are happening. I'll tell you, I ended up in the course of my pivoting out of the practice of law, which took about 2.5 years, by the way, making small changes, not jumping ship, not quitting. But in the process of my pivoting, it got worse before it got better. I ended up in the hospital thinking one Saturday morning when I was supposed to be at my son's baseball game, I ended up in the emergency room on a gurney thinking I was dying. My heart pounding so hard out of my chest, sweating profusely, racing thoughts, thinking I'm not going to see my kids again. Brutal. Until the doctor came in and said to me, "You're not having a cardiac event, Adam. Tell me a little bit about yourself, because right now what you're experiencing is an anxiety attack." And I shared with him about my life and the stress that I was under and the caseload and the fact that I wasn't happy with what I was doing at that time, and the caffeine that I was drinking and the sleep that I wasn't getting, the rest that I wasn't giving myself. And he said, "Look, you're going to walk out of here today. That's the good news. But if you come back, it might not be the same. So you've been given a second chance of a sort. You've been given a reprieve." And I remember I walked out of the hospital that day. I looked up at the sky. It was this beautiful, clear, blue autumn sky in Freehold, New Jersey. It was cold. And I looked up and I said, "Thank you, God." And those weren't words for me. I just wasn't saying things like that. I wasn't thinking that way. It was a litigation attorney. I don't know. But I knew it was like spontaneous that I needed to be in gratitude for something. And ultimately, I created a new practice where I woke up in the morning and I started putting my feet on the floor and thinking something different and saying something different. 10 seconds is all it took me to say 4 simple words. Those 4 words are, "I love my life." I love my life. That was my 10-second reset. So what I want you to do right now is use the Q&A. Let's fill up the Q&A right now with some of your responses. So go ahead and type in a 10-second reset for yourself. Now, I'm going to give you a little help here because I've got something written on my shirt, as you can see. It says, "I am resilient." So what I want you to do is I want you to actually use those words, "I am blank," and fill in the blank for yourself right now. As I'm speaking, go ahead and start typing in some of your answers to the Q&A. And you can write them down. Pick up a pen, take up your phone, write down your "I am" statements. What these are 10-second resets. So that at the beginning, when I was feeling that way, I didn't know what to do, But I came up with this statement. And then during the day, when I would feel that just misery, I mean, I was angry. I would get angry quickly. I would start to lose my energy around 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I would drink more coffee. I would eat more chocolate. I would do all the kinds of things that we all do because, look, you know, we're successful. We should be able to eat this stuff like it's nothing, like it's candy, like, you know, eat nails. Except at what cost? At the cost of what? And so the 10-second reset for me meant that if I could just pause, I could just close my eyes, I could just say those words to myself even, or say them out loud, that I felt better in the moment. So what's your 10-second reset right now? Nita, do we have some answers in the chat or in the Q&A?
See, I'm
Beautiful.
worthy. I'm an overcomer. I'm able to handle this. I'm in control. He's in control. I'm capable. I'm valued. I'm wise and open to more wisdom. I'm successful. I'm capable. I'm resourceful. I'm strong. I'm smart. I will work through this.
Oh, so
We've
cool.
been here before and triumphed. I am chosen. I and I alone am in the control of today, tomorrow, and the future.
I don't know about you, but I'm just literally getting chills listening to that. So thank you. Thank you all for doing this. And I know maybe it's a little unusual to share some intimate things like that with other people. Obviously it's confidential, right? Because it's not an open chat, so other people aren't seeing it anyway. So I want to just say thank you for your willingness to play and be 100% in what you're doing right now, and that you're even willing to be vulnerable and transparent. So thank you for that. It's absolutely beautiful. So we are talking right now about resilience, and the third component of what resilient organizations have learned, what they are, and what the individuals that are in those organizations do for themselves is they recharge. Resilience is about how we recharge, not how we endure. So the third piece of those skills of resilience is the ability to regenerate ourselves. In fact, what's really wonderful is that Harvard Business Review studied this at a great depth with thousands of individuals, hundreds of organizations. And they studied not only the organizations and their performance, but the performance of the best athletes in the world. So check it out. We're looking at athletes, Olympians, and professionals, and found that there was one thing in common. That's what came out of this HBR study. There was one thing in common between those highest performing Olympians and professional athletes and executives. And that one thing was the ability to create rituals. Not just any kind of rituals, by the way, rituals for recovery, mental, emotional, physical, yes, and spiritual rituals. Rituals for how it is that they individually and as a team, as Tom was saying, as a team, as a group, how did they recover? How did they regenerate their energy, their capacity, their flexibility, their agility when they were exhausted? Right now, exhaustion is an epidemic. It's been an epidemic in the corporate world. I've been a consultant in this space for a number of years now. The numbers are staggering. We're talking about $300 billion in lost productivity, lost engagement, toxicity in the workplace, turnover. We know that it's hard to even calculate the cost of that sometimes. That all of those things cost organizations so much because those organizations don't understand one fundamental fact, which is that you cannot continue to drive people. You cannot continue to run yourself or others or your company or your team on empty, because that's not where the greatest performance lies. We got to create that endurance. We've got to create that recovery because it's what helps us to perform at higher levels. And again, it's not just physical. It's not just the Rocky model. I mean, I remember 1975. Is that the year that the first Rocky came out? I think 75. And I always blow this, but how many Rocky movies have there been? If you know that, go ahead, put that in Q&A. I don't know. Somebody, I think one said 7, 8, 18, 26, what? You know, Sylvester Stallone's got a franchise, more power to him. But the one interesting thing about Rocky is he gets knocked down and knocked down and knocked down and knocked down. And every time he gets knocked down, what does he do? Come on, I can hear you. What does he do? He gets up. He gets up. And he's the model of endurance. So he wins our hearts in Rocky 1, Rocky first one. He wins our hearts, but he loses the fight. And as my buddies from South Jersey would say, and he don't look too good. He don't look too good. He's all banged up. And that's so many of us, that we are going forward banged up. We're going forward exhausted and burned out even, many. And that does not contribute to performance. So a lot of you took the resilience assessment. If for any reason you are not among the people that are included in the study, in the data points I'm about to show you, go right ahead. Feel free to eag.resilienceculture.com, eag.resilienceculture.com, to not only take the assessment for yourself, which will take 3 minutes. It's 16 questions, very quick, but you will more importantly get answers to those questions. You'll get answers to the specific areas where you might be falling short, where you might be on the path to burnout, or where you're just not performing at peak capacity. So organizationally, meaning across the spectrum, when we benchmarked what the results were, this is what they show. That as a whole, you've got 8%. 8% are performing in the green zone. 25% are performing in the red zone. Now, we talked about football earlier, so the red zone in this instance is not a good thing. This is not like being inside the 10-yard line. In this case, the red zone is like the burnout zone. It's like the zone that leads to brain fog or inability to perform tasks in an innovative way, to be able to see novel or create novel solutions to things, the ability to improvise, the ability to go longer distances, to create longevity for yourself and for others, is not represented by 25% of you being in the red zone. Interestingly enough, though, the score in the yellow, 67%, is a few points higher than the benchmark. So across a data set of 40,000 other people, hundreds of other companies, you guys are doing overall better than some. Now, let's take a look at some specific areas here, because one of the things that I found really telling was how difficult it has been for many of you to recover, to create recovery zones for yourself physically, meaning that you're putting your bodies on the line. And some of you are probably shaking your head right now because you know that you made yourself the sacrifice, meaning yourself physically, in order to continue to do as well as you've been able to do. But what you don't realize is that not taking care of yourself physically is not a recipe for long-term success. It's not a recipe even for short-term high performance. And so one of the things that's clear here is that many of you are spending so much time on your phones and your devices. That's what question 8 is all about. That red mark right there, where it's showing your score. This is one of the lowest scores, 32.1, that I've ever seen in any group. You guys are on your phone a lot. You're checking your phone a lot. They call this, as a technical term for it, called constant cognitive arousal. Average people are checking their phones or their devices 150 plus times a day, and you are probably above that line. Again, that you on the mental side are not taking time to quiet your mind, to find peace in the day, at the beginning of the day or at other points in the day, to be able to think. You know, my mother used to scream at my brother and I, and she'd say, "I can't hear myself think." I'm sure your parents said similar things, or maybe they didn't, I don't know. But that idea of being able to hear yourself think is so important. One of the things that this also shows is you have great trust for yourself. You trust yourself to create solutions. You trust yourself to show up. That's amazing. But what we also find is that you're not taking the best care of yourself emotionally, that the scores are all middle road, that on the spiritual side, what's really wonderful is question 13. I'm engaged in a livelihood that is in line with my core values and beliefs. That statement, many of you scored among the highest that I've ever seen. But it's also interesting that when you take a look at question 15, I don't invest enough time in making a positive difference to others in the world. Or question 14, there are significant gaps between what I'm saying is most important to me and what I'm actually doing with my time, how I'm actually spending my time. This was my issue. People ask me, and often they're lawyers who are practicing lawyers that say to me, so what was the straw for you? Why did you have to pivot? Why did you get out? And I was like, because for me, the most important thing at that time for me was my family, 4 healthy kids and a wife that I loved. And I wasn't seeing them. I was routinely not seeing them. I was routinely not there. And I would tell my wife almost every night that I'd be home for dinner. And then I would routinely come home late. And I'll never forget on a particular night that I walked in the house soaking wet and I saw her face. And the second that I saw her face, the second I saw her eyes, I knew I had done it again. I hadn't just missed the kids for dinner. I had missed kissing them goodnight. I missed reading them a bedtime story, putting them to bed. It broke my heart. I walked right up to her that day and I said to her, if I keep doing what I'm doing, you're going to be a widow. And she took a breath. And I know there are lots of people out there who don't have somebody truly supporting them and truly are in their corner. I know there's a lot of naysayers and a lot of other people. My wife in that moment was such a blessing to me because she didn't remind me that we had houses and cars. I mean, 4 kids, 2 dogs, big dogs, gerbils, goldfish, all those responsibilities and 2 offices. She didn't remind me of it because she knew I knew. I didn't have to have the proverbial midlife crisis that day because we could plan something different. She said, we'll figure it out. That's what she said to me. We'll figure it out. And instead of having that midlife crisis, I got, with her help, to create a midlife calling instead. I didn't need to quit and go to Fiji. In fact, what I often tell people is I didn't need to even leave the law. I would never change anything that's happened, but I have to be fair about that. I was under-resourced at the time. I didn't know how to take care of myself. I didn't know there was any way to do it other than the way I was doing it, which was to worry a lot, was to work a lot, and I mean a lot of hours, and no separation, or very limited separation between my personal life and my business life. It was the proverbial out of balance. So I didn't know how to do it differently than that. But you're in a better position than I was. And so again, we think about resilience, we have to think about how it is that we can meet ourselves right where we are in the moment, right here, right now. And it reminds me of this guy. Anybody know the name? Go ahead, put it in the Q&A if you know the name of this gentleman. I'll say a little bit about him, and maybe Nina, if you get an answer, I'll call it out, okay? Or you'll call it out. So he was the performance director for the British cycling team. You might notice that's the British cycling team there. And when he became the performance director, I think in 1998 of the British cycling team, they had the honor, get this, of being like the only team that had never won the Tour de France, ever. In fact, the last time that they medaled, they got a gold medal in the Olympics was 1908. So I think the technical or scientific term for this team was they sucked. And you would believe in that moment when Dave Brailsford is the name, all right? So I guess nobody got it. And I don't, he's an unsung hero. So maybe, that makes sense. But Dave Brailsford, whose name you will now remember, came into that team. And you'd imagine that with that record that he would have to make big changes, right? I mean, because the team was awful. He had to change some things. Some radical changes had to be made. Yes? Hello, yes? No! I'm kind of setting you up here a little bit, but no. His philosophy was entirely different. His philosophy was all about incremental progress, marginal improvement, progress over perfection, something he called the 1% factor, which was making 1% improvements to lots and lots and lots of things. I'll give you an example. They used to take these high-end cycles to the races in a box truck. The box truck was painted like brown or black on the inside. Dave Brailsford said, we've got to repaint the insides of the box trucks. Now, really quick, if you know the answer to this one, go ahead and put it in the Q&A. Why did Dave Brailsford want to paint the inside of those box trucks that are carrying the cycles to the race a different color? He wanted to paint them white. Why did he want to paint them white? Nina, any answers there? Why did he want to paint them white?
Clarity.
Clarity. Good.
Too
Yeah.
hot or too negative.
Uh-huh. So sort of the emotions that are tied to colors. Yeah, makes sense. What else? Anything else?
So they didn't get as hot.
So they didn't get as hot. You know what? These are great answers. But he actually painted the trucks white because he realized there was dirt and there was lint and other things that could possibly get caught in the gears of the bikes, of the cycles. So he painted the trucks white for one reason, so he could actually see it. So his maintenance staff could see that there was dirt that needed to be cleaned away. That's a 1% improvement. Where else did he make? He made so many 1% improvements to the British cycling team that in 2004, they won 2 Olympic gold medals. In 2008 and 2012, they won more medals than any other cycling team. And to date, I think they've got 5 or 6 now, 5 or 6 Tour de France victories. Amazing. And yet, we resist often making those small changes because we think they won't matter. They're not important enough. We got to make big changes. That's the only thing that's meaningful. So my question to you is, where is it that you can make 1% changes for yourself today, tomorrow, over the next week, over the next month, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually? Meaning resilience, again, is holistic. It's not just the Rocky model. It's not just physical endurance. It's about our mental capacity, our emotional resilience, our physical ability, capacity, and yes, even what's spiritual for us, because that's where we feel aligned and on purpose and fulfilled. So right now, more than anything, we've got to develop these rituals for resilience. What do the rituals look like? Well, for me, I divide them up into morning, afternoon, and evening. It's that simple. In a moment, I'm going to share the code of conduct with you. But it's everything you could think of that would begin your day on the right foot. It's everything that you could think of that could be incorporated into your day in the middle, where it is that you might be falling off the wagon the way I was falling off the wagon, needing that extra cup of coffee, feeling like I'm just screeching to a halt if I don't get some sugar in my body, feeling that the ability or being aware of how it is that you take care of yourself in the evening when work is done, when you're transitioning back to being a family member, or transitioning into how it is that you rest. And the difference between sleep and rest is something that we cover in some of our workshops, because there's a difference between sleep and rest, and we've got to be able to rest more than anything else. How do you unplug from that technology, etc.? All of these things are so important. In fact, I'm gonna share with you right now one of the things that I've gotten right here is my green drink. I'll share this recipe with you just a little bit later as well. But putting something good in your body, how do we take care of ourselves from the jump, from the moment we wake up? And that's this. For me, this is the morning ritual. This is the most important thing. Now, you see that picture right there. I got it. I can hold it up and show it to you live. This is my code of conduct, held together by tape, quite a bit of tape actually, and a whole lot of love. I started this about 12 years ago after reading that Ben Franklin had created a similar type of a code, or created a code for himself when he was alive back in the 1700s. And I thought to myself, and Ben Franklin wanted to keep himself to a high moral standard, so that's why he did it. For me, what I wanted to do was to start my day off on the right foot. I wanted to create the day that would most serve my highest interests, my interest in business, my interest in person, as a human being, as a person, as a father, as a husband, as a friend, as a brother, as a son, as a citizen. How could I show up as my best? And what I realized is that so many of us, and I was doing this back then as well, go about our day without any real plans, without any real intentions from the moment that we wake up. And so we allow the day to unfold. We allow things to happen by default, in other words. And for me, I wanted to take a much more proactive approach. I wanted to test the theory that I could actually become the conscious creator of my own life experience. Check this out. I wanted to see if I could consciously engineer my own experience of being, meaning how I would feel about the day, so that at the end of the day, I could check in and see whether or not I actually experienced my life that way. So it started out as 13, again, just to sort of model what Ben Franklin had done, 13 statements that I always start to this day, as I did this morning, with the same one. I experience gratitude today. And then I think, and sometimes I say it out loud, that I'm grateful for certain things, that I'm actually experiencing gratitude in this moment right now as I'm saying those words for EAG, for all of you, for Nina, for the whole team, for Tom, for everybody on your teams. I'm experiencing gratitude in this moment. And it feels darn good. And so I don't have to worry that at the end of the day, when I put my head on the pillow tonight, that I'll look back and say, did I experience gratitude today? Did I feel appreciation today? Because I've already locked that in, but I locked it in when I woke up because I checked in with my code of conduct. I experienced having faith and having faith in my faith today. I experience being an amazing creator of solutions today. I experience myself showing up as love and being willing to be love and be loved today. Anything that comes to mind or anything that I've written down from the past is perfect for me at the beginning of the day. So the whole point of this is that you take 5 minutes, that's all this is, 5 minutes at the start of the day to check in with some statements that start with these words, I experience. So right now, what I want you to do is I want you to look at these words, I experience blank, and I want you to fill them in for yourself. You can write them down, you can put them on your cell phone, and I'd really love it if you wouldn't mind, please put them in the Q&A right now so that Nina can read them out loud. I experience blank today. You are the creator of that experience. And I believe that what we intend is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you don't intend anything, you pretty much get whatever, like George Harrison said, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. Don't you love that one? It's, I think, a Traveling Wilburys song. But if you do know how you want to experience the day in business, how do you want to experience yourself showing up as a business leader today? How do you want to experience yourself showing up as a parent or as a sibling or as a friend or as a citizen in our country today? How do you want to experience yourself showing up today? Go ahead and write those down. And Nina, if we've got some, let's go ahead and share some of them out loud, please.
Dave here says, I experienced joy today. Another person experienced gratitude. A hard workout. I experienced positive resilience today. I experienced the amazing feeling that I helped someone else, making a difference in others. I experienced calm.
Beautiful. I
experienced wake-up call.
Yes, exactly.
I experienced being loved and to be loved.
Oh, how beautiful. Just the best. So here's my recommendation for all of you, that you fill out your list. And maybe you want to use, like, you're a traditionalist like me and you go with 13, but it could be 5, it could be 7, 10, whatever it is. Write them down and start your day tomorrow. Put your feet on the floor tomorrow and look at that list. Say them out loud. Maybe you're going to start like me with, I experience gratitude. It's the first one right out of the gate. And allow yourself to feel those things in the moment. And then all you have to do, because you don't have to trust me on this, just check in at night. Take a look, say, did I experience that today? Where I said, I experienced myself being an inspired leader of others today. Did I experience myself that way? Is that how my day went? Because if it didn't go that way, that's fine. You've got all the feedback you need in that moment. That's why it's so powerful. And where you did, you can ask yourself, well, why did that happen? Maybe it's because that's what my intention was. That's how we started the day. So right now, we're going to give you a bit of life work. And if you choose to do this, it's really simple. All you have to do is pick one thing, just like Dave Brailsford did, one small change, 1% change in each of the 4 quadrants, in each of these areas: mental resilience, emotional resilience, physical resilience, spiritual resilience. What's one thing that you can commit to doing right now to give yourself that edge, to be able to recover more quickly, to be able to perform at a higher capacity because you've actually taken care of yourself in the process. Remember your I am statement from earlier. Use that I am statement when things happen, when you open an email, when someone triggers you, you get upset, you get angry. What happens? You take a breath. You count to 10. You state that I am, whatever that is. Again, I got it on my shirt. I am resilient. And you think about that code of conduct and you start your day using it. So again, resilient organizations do something that other organizations don't focus on because they think it's soft. And that is that they learn how to reframe. They learn how to reset. And they also practice how to regenerate. And they don't just do it individually, but they do it as a team. Resilience is so important. It's more important than intelligence and talent. It's the most important skill that's required to succeed today. That's the point. That's why I'm so thrilled about what we do, because we know that when we work with organizations, we see this kind of growth when they are resilient. When they are resilient organizations, they're 42% higher in their growth. Year over year, their results are different. Their return on assets is different. Their overall performance, their growth after 5 years is different. The numbers don't lie. The statistics are clear. The studies are all certain of one thing. Resilient organizations outperform less resilient organizations. They don't just outperform them, they outlast them. They outlast them. So what kind of resilience are you going to cultivate? What kind of an organization are you going to be leading? Right now, to me, that's the most important conversation. I would love, because we were able to dive in, I'd love to continue this conversation with any of you, with your teams, with your organizations. I'm happy to come in, deliver something similar to this presentation or go deeper even, because we might create more of a workshop atmosphere, spend even more time, a couple of hours diving in. But either way, I'm happy to answer questions. So we're going to have a bit of Q&A in just a moment. But if we don't get to your questions or can't answer your questions, feel free to send those to me by connecting on LinkedIn or emailing us. Happy to do it. Happy to continue the conversation with any of you. And so right now, Nina, if we've got questions, I know I didn't call for questions earlier, but if there are some people that want to type in the Q&A, any questions individually about any of the things that we've covered or other things, I'm happy to spend a couple of moments answering those questions now.
We are going to start the Q&A. So we will first address written questions posed in the Q&A feature. So right now I'm not seeing questions. Glad to be joining. Oh, there you go, Kate. Glad to be joining a study group soon with the other advisors working to be their best and live balanced life at Equitable. It's not really a question. So what I'm going to do is open up lines now. If anybody has a question, if you raise your hand, I will unmute your line and you'll be able to ask your question.
Beautiful.
So please go ahead, raise your hand on the
while
bottom
that's
of your screen.
While that's happening, I'm also going to put this up. We're going to have handouts for everybody, so don't worry about if you couldn't take a screenshot of something and you want to go back to it. We'll have handouts for you that you'll be receiving, so that's great. One of the things that I wanted you to have was the green drink recipe, because this is one of those things you can do for yourself physically to really, really take great care. So you can take a screenshot of this if you like, but it'll also be in the handouts. So that's definitely one thing that I wanted to make sure that you had. So Nina, do we have a question in there as well?
There is a question from Kate.
Beautiful.
Kate.
Hi, Kate.
Hi there. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
Sure
we can hear you. Go ahead, Kate.
Great. Thank you very much for this inspiring conversation. I do have a question. I am still in a quandary about, I have really dealt well with those quadrants because, you know, frankly, well, you wouldn't see it now, but I did disclose that I do have a rare aggressive incurable cancer. So it gives you clarity on emotional, mental, physical, etc. So I am only here because I'm doing those things better with meditation and diet, etc. But my question is, business-wise, I'm still in a quandary over how to attack growing the practice, meaning I need to have 2 more advisors to replace me before I can step out. And you know, is there a process that you go through in problem solving that you can share as far as, you know, steps I might take? I am flailing around taking steps. I don't know if they're the right ones, but just wonder if you have any insight for me.
Well, I will. I'll share some things right now. That's a really, really important question. It's a deep question. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn or by email. I'm happy to go deeper and even make a call time for us to chat about it. To me, it's always the most important thing that we learn the difference between abdication and delegation, and that ultimately we have to delegate. For a business to grow, it can't grow when one star player tries to be every position on the field. I mean, I think that was in essence, well, one of the things I took away from Tom's remarks earlier was that the support of a team is so important. And in fact, it's kind of interesting. There's never an accident in the universe. I think I'm not a believer in randomness. I think everything is so connected. So Kate, I had this slide prepared and I didn't know why. I didn't know why it was in. I just wanted to bring it up. So I'll just pull it up so you guys can see this. I have my cursor. I don't know if you can see where my cursor is, but I'm this guy over here. Back in the day when I had some hair and I was 19 years old. And the reason why I have the slide up is because this is how we succeeded. I didn't tell you earlier that we lost that guy on the beach. It was actually field 3, which was not our field. We were at field 4. But it was devastating to lose someone, to see their family in so much pain. I've never to this day forgotten that. It's so many years ago. And we created this mantra that we would thereafter never let anybody else go down in our water on our watch. And for 7 more summers that I worked at that beach, we used to get crowds, and I kid you not, of more than 100,000 people. I don't know how many of you know Long Island or know the South Shore, you know, those beaches there, but the buses would come in, people from all over the city, from everywhere, get 100,000 people on that sand on a Saturday and a Sunday, and we would make hundreds, and I mean hundreds and hundreds of rescues every single day when the waves were strong and the currents and the rip tides were going. And so to me, the most important thing that I remember of that was 2 things. One was that our leaders modeled resilience for us. They never asked us to do something they weren't able to do or weren't willing to do themselves, including taking care. And the only reason we could have an impeccable record, so 7 summers that I worked there after that, we never lost anybody ever again. No one ever went down again on our watch. And that's in a life and death context, like you're describing. It's life and death when you have a health issue, and when you're simultaneously leading a family and leading an organization. It's a lot, but we couldn't do it alone. None of us could have. I could have been the greatest lifeguard in the world and been the greatest swimmer, and I could never have covered all that beach, all those people. The only way we could succeed was as a team. As a team that worked together, as a team that had each other's backs, as a team that gave each other permission in so many areas, including taking care of ourselves. We used to work in the stand for an hour, and then we would relax and take care of ourselves for an hour. In the stand, up in the stand for an hour, and down for an hour, where we'd read or we'd eat our lunch or we'd work out in the lifeguard check, or we'd swim or run or something. Up an hour, down an hour, up an hour, down an hour. Sort of like what's called the Pomodoro technique for taking care of yourself. All of that to say that we worked together as our best, and we gave each other permission to show up, and we supported one another to show up as our best. And that's how we had the strength to do what we did, which was seemingly impossible, if you look at it now, to have covered that ground and covered all those people in the water. And so for you right now, the most important thing that you can recognize is that it's not a nice to have others on your team to grow the business, and for you to be able to take care of yourself so you could be around long enough to see this business really come into its own, get into momentum, and truly thrive. It's a thing that has to happen now. And that's not to say that you rush through a process of getting the right people, that, you know, we have an onboarding process that's important, that cultural fits are important. But I can tell you right now, the most important thing for you is that you get at it, that you start meeting people, seeing people, interviewing people, and that you get people in those positions, and then knowing it's not about perfection. It's about progress, Kate. And so you're going to make mistakes. People are going to make mistakes. It's not going to be perfect. If you think that you're going to find somebody who's going to do it just like you do it right out of the gate, it's like I used to ask people in the, when we come together in live seminars and things, a workshop, I say, raise your hand if you're a perfectionist, right? And I say, well, look at your hand. Everybody do it now. Raise your hand if you're a perfectionist, right? Right? Nobody's arm is straight. Your arm's not straight. Your arm's crooked. There's no such thing as a straight line in the universe. And this is not about perfection. Dave Brailsford was not transforming the British cycling team trying to be perfect. Just 1% changes. So if I were you right now, what I would do, Kate, is I'd make a list of all the 1% changes that you can make. All the things that you can. So I'm going to give you 2 exercises. 1, make a list of all those 1% changes and then start getting about them. Second is I want you to create a T-chart. On the left-hand side of the T-chart, I want you to write down all the things that you know don't work. All the things that you know don't work. And then on the right-hand side, I want you to write down all the wisdom, all the things that you know work, only because you know what doesn't work. So sometimes we're taught not to focus on the things that don't work or the things that have gone wrong or the mistakes. To me, that's where the juice is. It's counterintuitive. You got to look at your mistakes so that you can know how to do it differently, how to do it better. You can't shy away from that. And so to think that you're stuck and bringing other people in to help you, it's probably because you're focused on doing it perfectly. So I know there's a lot more to discuss, and I might have, sort of broad stroked you there. That's why I said you can email me. Happy to have that conversation with you anytime, or connect with me on LinkedIn and we can set a time.